Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Pepin NHL Talk. I'm Thomas Pepin, and today we'll talk about the NHL. So, the subject of today's stream is evaluating teams' cap management, and we'll start with the Pacific Division. And so, this is going to be the first part of a four-part series I'm going to do over the next 4 days that takes a look at each team's cap management, evaluates it. So I'll probably give it a letter grade A to F. And yeah, so let's get right into it here. Just a moment. Okay, so first we'll start, like I said, in the Pacific Division. We'll go in. We will go in order from my predictions. So we'll start with the team that I think is going to do the worst this year, and then we'll go up from there. So we will start with the Anaheim Ducks and have a look at their cap management. So just before I get into that, this happens to be the type of subject that I'm most interested in, excited about. So my background, my profession, I guess you could say, is management and strategy consultant. And as a hockey fan, what I'm most interested in is the management and strategy of a hockey team. So, in this case, managing the cap, taking a look at analytics, stats, putting together a high quality team, projecting into the future, all that kind of stuff. Those are my main interests when it comes to the NHL. Now, of course, uh, because of my trade, I have no intention to get into management of hockey teams. So, well, the only way really is if I was um, I don't know how much money it takes to buy a team, but I'd have to be a part owner where I'd probably get involved on that side of things. And at this point, I don't have that kind of money. So that is not the plan. And so I'm just going to take this as a fan and give my 2 cents on things from that standpoint. So, like I said, we're starting here with the Ducks. They are currently the third least spending team in the league. Their current cap hit is 67.994 million, leaving them 14.5 million in cap space. Now, ideally, what you'd want to do is spend that cap space on high quality players and have a competitive team. But of course, they are not in that phase in their rebuilding, you could say. So it makes sense for them, in my opinion, to not spend as much and to be towards the cap floor. So obviously that makes sense. They're doing the right thing as far as I'm concerned. Uh, so that's a good start for the team. So, So that's like the broad picture analysis of the team's management. Um, and in case you didn't know, the general manager is Pat Verbeek, former player, very well-known, high-performing player in his time. So knows a thing or two at least about the sport, and then whether or not he's a strong GM in the long term, of course, we'll see. So he was, just to make note, assistant manager for Tampa from 2012 to 2019, assistant GM from 2019 to 2022, and then took on Anaheim in this past February. So about halfway through the season. So hasn't been able to, I guess, put his hands too much into the pot there to organize the team. But yeah, so again, it's more of a overall current standing, I guess, for the team, not so much an evaluation of the GM. So of course, it's kind of they're related, but that's not the goal really. So highest spending they have on a player is Henrique. He is making 5.825, has 2 years remaining, including this year. Performance, I would say, is at this point maybe not up to his salary. I don't know. It's close enough, basically. So it's not an unreasonable contract. So not bad there. Silverberg, he has had some pretty underwhelming years the past few years. That's where I'd say he's overpaid. 5.25. But again, something I mentioned in the stream I did about Steve Yzerman and the Red Wings. Sometimes you have to spend money, of course, and overspend in order to get to the cap floor. So, not wholly unreasonable for that salary to exist. Ryan Strome, this one, I don't know if I like that contract. He is making $5 million, 5 years, including this year. So past few years have been pretty decent. 49 points in 56 games, 54 in 74 for the past 2 seasons, both with the Rangers. I mean, it's not a bad contract. You could say it's a good contract even, but I don't know if if I would be giving him in particular 5 years at that price. So don't know if I like that contract there. Again, it's not unreasonable, not a bad contract, but term is what I wouldn't like so much on that one. And then I guess we'll chop it there. There's not too much of a point in going through all the salaries, obviously, because like you get into the millions and what's the difference between 1.5 and 1.25 and things like that. So we'll kind of cut it off at around, I don't know, 5 million ish. The contracts we'll take a look at. So we'll leave it there for the forwards. Klingberg came over from Dallas. He is only signed for 1 year, 7 million. So It's a weird contract, to be honest. Why he would wanna go there, so go from a team that's, competing at least for a playoff spot to a team that's almost certainly not competing for a playoff spot, in my opinion, at least. Um, I don't know, weird for him to sign there, and I remember when he signed that contract, I was kind of confused, but anyways, um, so at 7,000,000, 1 year, obviously, that's a great contract. Last year, put up 47 points in 74 games. That's kind of ballpark where you would expect him to perform on a yearly basis. So quite good as defenseman. And of course, he's well regarded. So um, really good contract. You only have the 1 year, so easy to get out of. Probably a good contract to trade. Maybe at the trade deadline, we'll see. Um, so could be in their cards, who's to say? Because that would be a great way to actually, build the roster long term to, trade away for assets. Really good strategy if that's in fact what they do. That's what I would do. But of course, we'll see. Um, so yeah, good contract there. Next up, Cam Fowler, 6.5 per for 4 years. Last year was his best year, 42 points in 76 games, really good. Usually it looks like he sits around 30 some odd points per year. So really good defenseman. 6.5 for 4 at 30 years old. It's a good contract, I'd say. Worth the money there. And actually, one thing I'm just going to go back on is, number of empty roster spots they'll have year after year. So won't actually tally them, but give you kind of an idea. Um, so from the forwards, basically uh, they're only really filling their forward roster for 2 to 5 years, which is smart. So that gives them some flexibility on roster, like signing people, negotiating new contracts if players underperform. Problem is when they perform well, then you have to pay more, but that's not really a big problem because you've got good performance. So at least with the forwards, they've got a lot of flexibility in there. We'll stop the contract evaluation here at Fowler. And on the note of roster spots, they only have Fowler as like a main contract into next year. So lots of flexibility on filling out the roster. So that's good for them, I'm sure. In net, they have one of the best goalies in the league, John Gibson. He's at 6.4 per and has 5 years remaining, including this year. I would say very good contract. In recent years, his save percentage hasn't been as high as it was previously. The team's not been very good, so you'd expect it to dip slightly. So past 3 years, 0.904, 903, 904, not unreasonable for a bad team. And then when the team was better, if I recall correctly. I won't go and have a look, but 914, 920, 924, 926, 917. So good goalie, assuming he hasn't slipped, which haven't watched his games so closely that I know, but from my understanding, he's still performing well. So all things considered. So for 5 years, puts him at 34 when he's in his last year. So still young enough, still a good contract, I'd say there. So altogether for Anaheim, we could probably say that they have a lot of flexibility built in there, decent contracts, not really any overspending to any big degree. Yeah, so really good job. Obviously not that strong of a team, but at least from a cap management standpoint, we could probably give them a high grade. I mean, what would I give them? I'd say an A. A is probably fair. B plus, maybe something along those lines. So lots of flexibility. I'd say really solid. And the only thing I don't like is that Ryan Strome contract, a bit too long for that player, in my opinion. But so yeah, we can say an A, I'd say, for the team right now. So that's Anaheim. Next, we'll move to the Kraken, Seattle Kraken. So Seattle is kind of middle of the pack in spending. Their cap hit 81.389 million with 1.11 million cap space. Now, given their performance right away, I would say to be that close to the cap with that poor of performance, not very good start. Ron Francis, the GM there. So they have a number of contracts, all approximately the same, which is good if those are good players. Now, you could argue not so good in their case, but let's have a look. So Jordan Eberle, 5.52 million, or sorry, 5.5 million, 2 years remaining. He, as of recent years, has slipped slightly, you could say. Yeah, last year, 21 goals, 44 points, 79 games. It's kind of hovered around 40 to 50 in recent years. So 5.5, 2 years, good contract, flexibility there. And the performance is good, and he's got a bit of upside if he can get back to some of his better performing years. So good contract there. Jaden Schwartz, 5.5, 4 years remaining. He is in a similar boat. Past couple years hasn't played as much. Well, the COVID shortened year, but last year 23 points, 37 games, 21, 40, 57 with 22 goals in 71 the year before. So good performance. Another one there, I'd say at 5.5 is good. Don't like 4 years necessarily, but again, not unreasonable. Burakovsky, He is 5.5 per, 5 years remaining. His performance is better than I thought it was going to be. So last year, 22 goals, 61 points in 80 games. Quite good. Prior, 19 goals, 44 points in 53. 20 goals, 45 points in 58. And then before that, not nearly as good, approximately half the performance. So, yeah, to sign, you would be hoping he's on the upswing, 27 years old. That'll put him at 32 at the end. So it's kind of his prime years. So I guess they're projecting him to perform approximately the same or better. Was on Colorado. So can he perform the same? I'd be concerned. So I don't know if I like that contract from the term specifically. Dollar amount, I would say, is not unreasonable, but I wouldn't have it for that term. Because I wouldn't project him, you know, uh, just looking at things simply to be necessarily on the upswing. I'd say he's probably somewhere around where he's at or less, maybe. So I don't know if I like that contract. Bjorkstrand, 5.4 per year for 4. Last year, 28 goals, 57 points in 80 games with Columbus. Previous year, 44 points, 56 games, 36, 49, and 36 in 77. So last year was very good. Year before would be on pace for that. So good stats, 5.4. Good. Still don't really like the term. 4 years is kind of slightly long for me. With the players that are not as guaranteed, I'd want to keep it around 3 years. That's my or how I would approach it, but sometimes it's not always possible because you might not be able to sign the guy because a lot of players want term, or they'd want to be paid higher with shorter term. Personally, I'd probably go with higher pay, shorter term if you can. Not always possible, I'm assuming. I'm not a GM, so don't know. But yeah, again, in that case, don't quite like that contract, but it's not bad, obviously. Gord, next player at 5.167. He's for 3 years. Last year, 21 goals, 48 points in 74 games with Seattle. Pretty good. Before that, 36 points, 56 games, 30 points, 70 games, 48, 80. Those were all with Tampa. So not unreasonable. 3-year term, more along the lines of what I'm looking for. So I'd say that's a decent contract. Now, one thing you can see already, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I've gone through. One more at 5 million. That's a lot of people getting paid 5 million, and these are not players that are necessarily all worth 5 million. So don't know if I like that. Again, we'll kind of touch on that more towards the end here. So next, Jared Mccann, 5 million per 5 years. Last year, 27 goals, 50 points for the Kraken. Year prior, 32 in 43, 35 in 66, and then 35 in 78. So that one again, it's kind of in the same they're all basically the same kind of player in terms of output. Don't like term 5 years. He's 26, so if you think he's got upside, maybe not so bad. So again, don't know if I like that contract, but it's not bad. We will touch on Wenberg, 4.5 million for 2 years. 37 points in 80 games, 29 and 56, 22 and 57. Only really had one good year, 59 and 80 in Columbus back in 16-17. So 4.5, probably high, 2 years, good term, not a bad gamble, I would say. So not a bad contract, really. And the only player, or I should say actually on forwards, a lot of people with terms. So you're essentially determining that's your core for more or less 2 to 5 years. Don't like that core to win a Stanley Cup. Make playoffs, maybe, but to win a Stanley Cup, I don't like that core because where's the high end talent? So yeah, not a good look for the forward group, just from an overall standpoint. Flexibility and expected performance there. So then on defense, Oleksiak is the only player that's got a relatively high contract, so 4.6 million for 4 years. Last year, 17 points in 72 games for 4.6 in 4 years. I'd say that's a bad contract. I don't like it. I mean, I know he has size, and if it's that he's defensive, good, but that's kind of high, I think, for a defensive defenseman. Maybe other people would disagree, but I wouldn't spend that much. It would have to be a defensive defenseman with offensive upside, and he doesn't have it, in my opinion. So don't like that contract. Vince Dunn, 4 million, 35 points, 73 games, and he kind of hovers around that amount. That's a really good contract, in my opinion. RFA status next year. I'd probably try to sign him to a decent term. He's the kind of guy I would lock up, preferably, at least 3 years upwards to 5 or more, depending on what you can get him at there. So he's a guy that I would look into keeping around. So that's a good example of my kind of contract I'd like. So then Larson, 4 million per 3 years, 25 points last year, 82 games. That's good. Kind of hovers around that. 4 million. I'd say that's a reasonable contract. 3 years, fine. That's fine. Then we'll stop it there. So there on defense, their core of essentially 4 players is between 1 and 4 years locked up. So flexibility is good. Don't really like the Oleksiak contract, but so on defense, it's not that bad, I'd say. Forwards, I don't like that much. Grubauer, they have in net 5 years, 5.9. Now, I think he was only playing well. This is my opinion. because he was on Colorado. You see him step into the Kraken last year, 0.889 save percentage, down from 0.922. So I don't know why they chose him. I never thought he was a high quality starter. He could prove me wrong. It's only 1 year that he's down. But he previously played for Washington, a good team, and then Colorado, a good team. Kraken, not a good team. And so that's where I'd say really don't like that contract. I wouldn't be that high on him. So yeah, I don't like that. Otherwise, they have a couple guys on IR, and that's about it. So altogether, I'd say a number of bad contracts, in my opinion, specifically because of term and overall the amount of performance they're getting out of the combined roster. So, yeah, don't like their cap management. They're right up to the cap almost, and this team's never going to be. Sorry, I had something move there. Give me one sec. Okay. So anyways, yeah, don't like their cap management, in my opinion, because this team has no chance, in my opinion, to compete for a Stanley Cup. It's all long term, or relatively long term with their core, which isn't very good. So in my opinion, I'd give them a D or something along those lines. There's like no flexibility, not a good roster, not going to win, stuck for a relatively long term. So like 5 years, unless they draft outstandingly, which they just started as a franchise. Like I very strongly doubt that this team is going to be anything in the next 3 to 5 years. So D minus, almost even an F is what I'd give them. I think it's a bad, really poor cap management, in my opinion. So they just started. So yeah, not looking good for Seattle there. Next up, San Jose Sharks. Their cap spending is at the cap. They're not a good team. 8.227 cap space of 0.23 million. Yikes. And their GM, Mike Greer. Now, he just went in, so to some degree, I guess he's inheriting whatever's there. But anyways, let's have a look. So Thomas Hurdle, 8.137 per for what is that? Is that 8 years? Yeah, 8 years. And that's a long time. So him past couple years, last year 30 goals, 64 points in 82 games, quite good. Previous year 43 in 50 games, 36 in 48, 74 in 77. So projected ballpark point per game player with good scoring. At that price, it's not unreasonable. Don't like the term. He's going to end his contract at 36, which is getting older. At 8.1, I don't like the contract. He better be scoring around 30 goals or something every year to warrant that. I mean, it's not overly expensive. You could be getting into the 10 millions or whatever with that kind of performance, last year's performance at least. But yeah, I don't like the upside necessarily on him with the term and age. I'd say not a good contract, but it's not the worst contract. So Logan Couture, he's making 8 million, 5 years remaining. He's 33, 38 at the end at 8 million. Last year, 23 goals, 56 points, 77 games. Previous 31 and 53, 39 points, 52, 70, and 81. If I had to take a guess, most of his best years are either going to be in the next couple years or they're behind him. Team's not that great. You're not going to get that great of performance. I don't like the term. Price isn't so bad for him. Term don't like. Again, don't really like the contract there. Timo Meyer, 6 million, 1 year remaining, goes to RFA afterwards. Last year, 76 points in 77 games, 35 goals. Really good. Previous year, 31 points, 54 games, 49 in 70, and 66 with 30 goals in 78 the year before that. So looks like he's coming into his prime. 26 years old, 6 million, obviously a great contract at this point. They're going to have to be careful to get him at a reasonable price. And the most important thing is because you have to keep your spending low as possible, even on your high end players, because then you won't be able to fill out your roster. The only way you should spend up to the highest salary is if it's your top player in the NHL, like a McDavid or McKinnon. That's the only way you should be getting into like the 12 million or whatever contracts. Anything even in the tens, I would be avoiding at all costs. I'd be trading players if they're demanding 10 million, even with this kind of good performance. Because the thing is he's had a couple decent years. Last year was really good. He's probably going to say, "Oh, I can do this every year," but you can't expect that. So if he's asking for something high, I wouldn't be paying it. In like the 8 to 9 million range, yeah. Oh, for sure, I'd be willing to go for that. The 8 million mark is probably be my target. Whether or not you could, get that, that's another story. But, yeah. So that's going to dictate a lot for them there. We'll touch on Kevin Lebank there, 4.725, 2 years. Last year, 6 points, 21 games, previous 28 and 55, 33 and 70, 56 and 82. So has been down, excuse me, in recent years. So at this point, that contract's not looking very good, but yeah, it's only 2 years, so not the end of the world. So their core is basically 2 players to between 5 to 8 years, and Timo Meyer about to be signed to something probably. So good flexibility in terms of number of players under contract. Not the best flexibility in terms of term. Again, not the worst contracts, but not ideal either. So decent situation for forwards for San Jose. On D, they have Erik Karlsson, 11.5, 5 years. Now, I thought he was way overpaid when he got that contract. 8 years at 11.5. Yeah, he's had some great years, but I would never spend that on a defenseman. Unless maybe if it's like the best defenseman in the league or something like that, and he's putting up a whole bunch of goals. Because, like, I mean, Cale Makar, 28 goals, 86 points in 77 games, like over a point per game, 28 goals from a defenseman. Yeah, that's where you can get into the that much, because it's so hard to find in a defenseman to produce like that. So you could conceivably pay that for a defenseman, but I wouldn't, or I would try my best to avoid it at least. So last few years for Carlson, 35 in 50, 22 points in 52, 40 in 56. Had injury problems of late. He is 32. I'd say his best years are behind him. 11.5. Yikes. That is going to be really nearly impossible to get rid of as well. So that's bad. I would say that's a really bad contract. And I would have never signed that for him if I ever was in that position. So, yeah, not good at all. Vlasic, 7 million for 4 years, 35. That puts him 39 at the end. Doug Wilson was a guy making these signings. Like, yikes. What was he thinking? These are some bad contracts. So Vlasic was great as a defenseman 6 years ago. I mean, I'm sure he's not bad right now, but at that price, that's not worth it. So 14 points, 75 games, 6 in 51, 15 in 70, 25 in 72. I know he's kind of more of a well-rounded defenseman, but 7 million per 4 years left up to age 39. Brutal contract again. So we'll stop there. Goalies both at 2 point something million. Good contracts. Reimer especially 2.25. 1 year remaining for Reimer. A great contract. He's a very serviceable goaltender. I'd say way outperforms his contracts that he's had. So, God, great value there. But yeah, otherwise, defensive core, you've got basically 3 players between 4 and 5 years, 2 of which are old. Other contracts are all lower, so not that bad, but yikes. So at the highest end of their team, no flexibility. To round out the roster, great, but they spent so much at the high end. They're right up against the cap. You cannot fill out that roster with a good team. So, again, I'd say a D. Like, I'd say really poor cap management. Not a good team from a cap standpoint there in San Jose. We're at 45 minutes, and I've gone through 3 teams. We'll stop at the Kings, I guess, then. And you know what? We'll break it into 2 parts per team, it looks like. And that's, I guess, part of the joys of doing this on the spot is you don't know how long you're going to take on this. And these are all I'm spending time on things that I think are relevant, interesting, whether or not you will. I hope you do. But yeah. So anyways, we'll stop here at the Kings. So Los Angeles Kings cap spending 81.2. And so that is cap space of 1.25. And let's have a look at the team. Managed by Rob Blake. Forwards, Anze Kopuitar, 10 million, 2 years left, 35 years old. Still producing. Last year, 19 goals, 67 points, 81 games, 50 points in 56, 62 with 21 goals and 70 the year prior. Performance has gone down versus his best years, but he's a well-rounded player. At his age, to be at 10 million, it's on the high end, only 2 years left. He'll be 37 at the end. Not a horrible contract. I would say not a good contract. I'd probably want him somewhere around 8 or 9, but so not the worst, but not good. Fiala, they have him for 7 years at 7.875. He's 26, so he's not going to be too old at the end of it. Last year, 85 points, 33 goals, quite good in 82 games. Previous year, 20 goals, 40 points, 50 games, 23 goals, 54 points, 64 games. So a good score, trending upwards at 7.875. That's the kind of contract, again, that I'd be looking for. 7 years, 35 years old at the end. Maybe I'd have it a year shorter, 2 years preferably. But that's a pretty good contract, I'd say. Philip Deneau, 5 years, 5.5. Last year, 27 goals, 51 points, 79 games. Previous, 24 points, 53 games, 47 points, 71 games. So if he's trending as he produced last year, that's going to be a very good contract. If he's back to where he was, I would say not the best contract, not the worst. So a reasonable contract. My understanding, he's a good kind of two-way player and produces. So I'd say it's probably good value, all things considered, with his upside, it looks like. So it's probably a really good contract, but I'm still hesitant because of past years. So, but not a bad contract. Yeah. Adrian Kempe, 4 years, 5.5. Last year, 35 goals, 54 points, 78 games. Previous year, 29 points, 56, 32, and 69. So you'd be hoping that he's continuing to trend upward. He's 26. So not a bad contract, I'd say. Again, maybe not ideal. Maybe you'd want him at 3 years left at this point with his performance, but it's not the worst, so that's all right. Then we'll stop it there. So forwards, the core is basically between 2 and 7 years. So some flexibility there. Not bad contracts. I'd say pretty well managed up for their forwards. On D, they have Doughty, 5 years, 11 million per, 32 years old. That's going to put him at 37 at the end of that. Don't know if his stats warrant that, but we'll have a look. So 31 points in 39 games last year. That's good. Missed a lot of time, though. 34 and 56, 35 and 67, 45 and 82. And his best years are all prior to that. So 11 million, I'd put that in the same kind of realm as Carlson. Not a good contract because his best years are behind him. So that's the thing, is a lot of these players, they get paid after they've performed well, which is a problem. And then they often get underpaid before, or sorry, as they're playing well. So it's a tough balance. Sometimes you got to, it seems like they have to pay for years that they didn't give them as much as they should have. So, I mean, it's tough. But again, personally, if they're asking for that kind of stuff, I'd trade them. You got to keep your cap spending low because you got to maintain a good team. And as long as you're drafting well, you're leaving spots for new players to develop in. So that would be my strategy. So I don't like spending so high for, especially on defensemen, unless you're like a Mccann kind of performance. But even that's high. So, anyways, not a good contract there. The rest are all relatively inexpensive. Their core on defense basically is to those 5 years for Doughty. So some flexibility there. Not really any bad contracts except for Doughty there. In net, 5.8 million for Quick, 1 year remaining. Cal Peterson, 5.5 for 3. So we'll have a look at both of those there. Quick, obviously 5.8, I would say, is decent value when he was performing well. At this point, not performing as well. 9.1 save percentage last year. 0.898, 904, 888 the years before. So at this point, he's overpaid. Maybe a good trade option. If somebody would take the contract, maybe you could retain a bit of salary, maybe. I'm sure they probably already investigated. It could be one of those where you're trying to shed the salary and you have to actually give assets for somebody to take it on. So it's tough because he was a really good goalie for a long time. So, I mean, at this point, not the best of contracts, but it's the end of a 10-year contract. So, I mean, 5.8 for 10 years for him. You saw with the cups they won, very worth it. So, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't say it's a bad contract because it's just, what are you supposed to do otherwise? Just don't sign him for that long of a term is the answer, I guess. But Cal Peterson, like I said, 5 million per 3 years. Last year, 0.895 then prior 9-1-1, 37 games, and then 35 games respectively. And that's about it for a track record. So how did he get signed to that? I don't know. Bad contract, in my opinion. So altogether, I'd say good contracts up front, flexibility there, still up towards the cap. That's where I'd say the problem is 2 goalies and the 1 defenseman, Doughty. So it's tough because there's not much flexibility there. So I mean, it's probably a C, maybe B minus. I'd give them for cap management. They have to shed those high end salaries, and I don't know if they ever will be. So after this year, when they lose Quick's salary, they'll be in better shape. But yeah, it's not that great of a roster for their spending because they're not competing for a cup. So yeah, something like a B minus or a C. So that puts us at about 56 minutes. We'll stop it there. So I guess this is going to be an 8-part series, which is not what I was planning, but let's hope that you guys enjoy it. This stuff for me is very interesting and I really enjoy it. So I hope it translates to you guys. So this is more obviously for the people that are interested in the management side of things. So I hope you enjoy. So if you did enjoy, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notifications. Again, the plan is every day, 5 p.m. Eastern, until I'll be switching to 4 p.m. eventually when the time change takes place. And then yeah, I'll have other times here and there where things will change depending on vacations and other things that go on. So, yeah. And so, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you again tomorrow.